Project Addiction, Chapter 2, Psychonaut. But, said Alice, the world has absolutely no sense. Who's stopping us from inventing one? Lewis Carroll, Alice in Wonderland. What is a psychonaut? Psych, soul, spirit, mind. Nautis, sailor, navigator. An explorer of varying states of consciousness. A psychonaut explores consciousness with a specific intent or to expand and evolve. Meditation, ritual, ceremony, and engaging in challenging life experiences are some of the mediums used to explore and expand consciousness, and these are often undertaken in combination with mind-altering substances. Life experiences themselves can become tools for reaching enlightenment or consciousness exploration, suggesting the simple truth that there are infinite ways of exploring that can be used in psychonetics, like the 7 notes in the musical scale and 7 base colors of the color spectrum that can be combined for an infinite number of chords, notes, shades, and hues. The mediums for consciousness exploration are also as mutable. Physical knots. Extreme sports enthusiasts base jump, skydive, free climb, snowboard, or ski down completely vertical mountains, which most normal people would never intentionally consider doing. As a matter of fact, most of us would accept death by tiger mauling before jumping off a cliff, with the only means of survival being a handheld parachute in our palm. For most people, and I mean rational people, base jumping is synonymous with death. Yeah, it's dangerous, but the need to go farther and higher and faster is inescapable. When you're in that moment, the rush and the excitement is all that exists. Yeah, you know it's dangerous, but since you've tasted it, you've got to go more and more just to even get near the same satisfaction you once had in those moments. In those moments, life becomes absurdly simple and meaningful. This is a quote from an extreme sports snowboarder who virtually risked his life for an adrenaline rush. If this sounds a lot like the rhetoric you would expect to hear from a hard drug abuser, you're right. Extreme drug enthusiasts infer the exact same idea. Both of these activities, extreme narcotic use and extreme sports, flirt with death and disaster. Heroin addicts can and often do overdose, suffering from lifelong complications or worse, death, as a result of their quest for the next bigger rush. Extreme base jumpers, like the one who experienced 5 months of painful, rigorous physical therapy to repair her broken body from a gone wrong base jump, do the same thing. They risk an extreme amount for their next rush, and many of them die as well. The percentage of extreme sports players who die from the pursuit of bigger challenges is similar to the percentage of drug users who die from drug-related deaths. There are major differences, though. Extreme sports players train hard and train a lot. They use specialized equipment and put a lot of emphasis on preparation and caution. You won't see a novice who has never base jumped before going broke ever. They work their way up to the bigger challenges gradually, but eventually they have to take a leap to push beyond where they've been if they want to get to the next bigger rush. By contrast, the drug abuse culture is filled with novices without training or experience, and they, like an inexperienced skydiver, have to know not to go too far too soon, or they will, and often do, die. I have skydived and scuba dived, jumped from 50-foot waterfalls, and backpacked the Sierras. My adventuring is not in the same class as extreme sports players, but I have sampled enough to know what they are getting out of it, and that they, like mystics, spiritualists, meditators, and drug users, are psychonauts, pushing themselves into extreme situations to go beyond normal human experience to see just what exactly is on the other side. My motivation to jump from a perfectly good airplane for a skydive was similar to my motivation to sample LSD or crystal meth. I wanted to feel something beyond the normal parameters of human experience. I wanted to brush up against death and see what it felt like and live to tell the tale. But mostly, I wanted to experience the profound, the special, the unknown, and have it change me. To understand my own identity, I felt I must view the entire spectrum of it. Physical nauts versus psychonauts. Psychonauts do not avoid extreme challenges, they look for them. Extreme sports players scour the globe for new places to jump, raft, and ski from. Mystics and spiritualists scan their inner world and their outer world for new horizons and experiences that will leave them different than before. Many drug users are attempting the same thing, to go beyond the parameters of their known self and conventional experiences to learn more about themselves and discover the boundaries of their own identity. This book is not about extreme sports. It is not about a quest for enlightenment either, but it is not possible to discuss the culture of drugs and their effects on the minds of those who use them without at least drawing comparisons and wading into the philosophical waters for discussion. Like participating in extreme sports, becoming a psychonaut requires training and preparation, a sober intellectual attitude, a spirit of adventure and exploration. When these requirements are adhered to, it is often as safe or safer than trekking down 8 100 meters into an unexplored cave. Dangerous, yes, but exhilarating and satisfying too. Yes, drugs can hurt you, and so can base jumping. Yes, drugs can kill you, and so can mountain climbing. Drugs can cause brain damage, and the more drugs you do, the higher the odds you will eventually damage yourself or someone else, just like other dangerous things. But drug exploration requires toxic, foreign substances, and extreme sports is natural and organic. No, they are not the same at all. Another similarity between the two categories is motivation. Most extreme sports players are out for nothing but themselves, a big rush and a good time. They'll work hard jobs just to fund their expeditions, hoping to be good enough to get funded by a sponsor like Red Bull so they can pursue their sport full time and gain access to more and better challenges. Do you have any idea how much it costs for Shaun White, the world famous X Games winner and extreme snowboarder skateboarder, to take a helicopter to a crazy peak in Tibet, Nepal, Alaska, or the Dolomites? Me neither, but sponsorship helps. Psychonauts, by definition, are largely motivated by sharing research and experience in an attempt to enlighten others and lead them out of the darkness of mundane consciousness and into a higher, more evolved state of being. Most extreme sports extremists and business extremists are in it for themselves, what they can accomplish, achieve, and acquire. The majority of drug abusers are also in it for themselves. They not only do not share anything of evolving, enlightening value, but instead become parasites to those around them. They do not train, nor are they trying to do anything but fulfill a self-serving agenda of experiencing pleasure, and they lose sight of how this affects others. Most of the heroin addicts I've encountered in my community get loaded and torment hardworking mothers, fathers, and spouses without a conscience. While I feel for them and work my hardest to liberate them from their addictions, I see their abuse. I see their issue as something much more than being enslaved to the pleasure compulsion of a drug. They are inherently selfish and will take until there is nothing left. From mothers, fathers, and spouses without a conscience. While I feel for them and work my hardest to liberate them from their addiction, some require hitting rock bottom as the only way that will get them to stop hurting those they know. The equation is almost always the same: a compulsive, unconscionable addict combined with codependent, cowardly family members unwilling or unable to do the difficult, emotional task of stopping the cycle. Yes, I know, I make it sound obvious and easy to judge, but I do not see it as obvious or easy to judge at all. If I've learned anything in my 10 years as a counselor, and I've learned a little, it is that there are people of varying levels of intellectual and emotional capacity. What is frustrating to see people who seem like they get it, sound like they get it, look like they get it, who simply don't get it. They cannot get themselves together without outside leverage and help. Recognizing that everyone has varying limitations has taught me compassion. When I began as a counselor, I found myself judging so many people who I deemed to have lesser intellects or emotional stability than I. As I worked with them, I learned humility and perspective through their suffering. Instead of seeing people as stupid or small-minded, I began to see them as human beings trapped by limitations, the same way a physically disabled person has limitations they cannot simply overcome. A mentally, intellectually, or emotionally impaired person is simply limited. It is not by choice. They often seem to understand what I've explained and even appear to be making breakthroughs. And yet, when I see them in the very next session, after a vowed transformation, it is as though we never shared a cathartic breakthrough the week before. Like a rubber band, snapping back to its original shape once the pressure of exerting it beyond its natural shape is released. The mind reverts back to what it's familiar with. Some people improve and some downright change, but many stay within the same circumference of their existing pathologies and never get far enough to reach an outer ring that could be liberating. As if there was an invisible, elastic shield that serves as a slingshot, taking them back to their most familiar mentality. As a counselor, I learn to accept people as they are with their limitations, all the while wanting them to change, and I never give up trying to help liberate them from their limitations that cause them to suffer. Accept them as they are, yet facilitate and encourage change. What a paradox! Of course, I fully acknowledge that I myself have limitations, that I also am ignorant and do not easily move beyond my limitations. I don't know what I don't know. A teacher and guide of mine revealed to me in ways that were embarrassing and humiliating what a dope I am compared to the total spectrum of knowledge and humanity. The lesson was embarrassing and humiliating, yet liberating. That is a teacher's role, to point out your shortcomings while simultaneously accepting your faults without condition. Psychonaut qualifications. Not everyone is a qualified candidate for being a psychonaut, any more than any average person is cut out to base jump or competitively snowboard. Never mind training, athletic aptitude and ability is needed to be an extreme skier. There are people born with physical limitations that prevent them from doing an extreme sport they long to do. And there are those born with mental and/or emotional limitations that disqualify them from extreme consciousness exploration, especially with drugs. The risks are many when using substances in psychonetics: addiction, mental or emotional dysfunction, brain damage and disorders, and trauma, just to name a few. Because drugs are available to nearly everyone and there's no required test to qualify candidacy to experience them, tragedy abounds. Unfortunately, drugs get blamed for these events. It reminds me of the saying, guns don't kill people, people do. Guns are dangerous in the wrong hands, and it certainly seems that a large percentage of gun owners are the wrong people to own them. Drugs are like this too. Drugs don't kill people, people kill themselves with drugs. With education, understanding, limited availability, and intelligent regulation, drugs can be safer than they are now. Not safe, just safer. You will never stop people from shooting other people, and we will never cure or stop addiction or death or destruction of lives as a result of drug abuse. I make this prognosticating declaration. There will never be a cure for addiction in the span of humanity, regardless of how long humans exist and science marches forward. Addiction is not exclusive to drugs, or to a set of behaviors, or to a certain fraction of the population. It is a component of the human condition that is dormant in many, but present in absolutely everyone in the simple truth of desiring. We are desire machines. We form endless streams of needs and wants from our minds. If we are awake, that is conscious, we are forming desires. Some are large and potent desires, and some are small and insignificant. Addiction is more than a specific disorder or pathology. It is simply an expression and manifestation of the basis of human nature. We want. We want comfort, peace, love, respect, status, power, validation. We want pleasure over pain. Wanting is the source of addiction, our need for more and our basic human nature that leads us to pursue pleasure and avoid pain. The only relief from this is total liberation from our own minds or death, and that's no relief. We seek, and that seeking will never end until we achieve a final, absolute, perfect, and absolute experience of pleasure, bliss, peace that is never ending and exponentially increasing. Until then, we will always want extra cheese with those fries, a few more dollars, another channel to choose from on the remote, and so on and on and on. This text is not designed to encourage drug use or abuse. This author does not believe that drugs are a path to liberation or enlightenment as he once considered or expected in his ignorant youth. Drugs are dead ends, sometimes literally, and at most, they can serve as an indicator, like a finger, pointing the way, alluding and hinting at something for you to discover. But it is essential not to confuse the finger for what it is pointing to. In other words, what you seek is not the drug itself, nor is it the drug experience. You seek and desire to be liberated from the trappings of the human condition and its inherent limitations. Instead, the drug feeling is, at best, merely a sign, an intimate view or glimpse into what is possible, like an appetizer or an enticement to look further and seek the real thing. The real thing is the absolute pleasure, bliss, peace experience that is available to all who seek it organically and purely, but not with artificial means. Drugs give you a clue, a hint, at something sublime, but they give nothing more than a hint. They are a tease, and like any tease, they inevitably conclude in disappointment. One of the most fascinating features of drugs and all sensual pleasures is that they, in and of themselves, don't do anything to you. All drugs do is cause the chemicals, molecules, and neurotransmitters that already exist within your brain to increase or decrease in volume. Drugs block or enhance the production of neurotransmitters that you already own and possess. They don't add anything new to the equation that isn't already present. They simply alter the equation to one end of the spectrum or the other, increasing or decreasing specific neurotransmitter production. A common myth is that humans only use 10% of their brain. While this is far from literally accurate, there is some truth regarding untapped potential. Neuroscience tells us we actually use all of the parts of our brain, but the evidence seems clear that while we are using all portions and sections of the brain, we are not accessing its total capabilities. It is impossible to quantify what brain's percentage is unused, dormant, or is simply unknown to us. We don't know what we don't know. Clearly, we can observe the difference between people's intellectual levels. Some people are simply smarter than others. If we use an fMRI to map the brain activity in two different people doing algebra and math problems, we will see they are both using the same neurons and sections of the brain. Yet one subject might solve the algebra problem with those neurons, and the other may not be able to solve a simple division equation. Therefore, we see that everyone uses the whole brain, but to different potentials and capacities. Einstein said the only difference between him and others was that he stayed with a problem longer, implying that his tenacity was the real source of his genius. That may be true, but how did he stay with it longer? What was he accessing that allowed him to concentrate on a problem with the same level of focus a Zen master uses to enter into a satori, a sublime state of consciousness, for long periods, and why can't I do it? We may all be using the whole brain, but it obviously works at different intensities and efficacies for different people. A common feature of many deranged or mentally ill people is a superintellect in areas that most cannot conceptualize. Savants have extraordinary and prodigious abilities in areas like art, calculation, musical talent, or memory, yet many of them cannot tend to their most basic needs of hygiene or even tie their own shoes. When I say they demonstrate extraordinary talents, I mean that many are not only up to par with geniuses in similar areas, but far exceed them, and without training or teaching. Supernatural. We must begin to accept that at least some of the people on this planet have what seems like inexplicable abilities in psychic areas. Whether levels of clairvoyance, clairaudience, precognition, or others, there are simply too many cases to totally ignore these talents. We can debate to what degree they exist, but it is no longer sensible to insist they do not exist at all. Since the people who demonstrate these abilities didn't go to Hogwarts to learn them, they are, in most cases, innate and therefore a manifestation of a level of brain functioning that most of us do not experience, nor know how to experience. Scans done with an fMRI, performed on clairvoyants while they are having a psychic vision, do not show neurons firing that do not fire in other people. We see similar areas firing, simply performing a different way than they would with someone who is not clairvoyant, and this is the missing information we cannot access. Yet, we can see parts of an fMRI light up that indicate what areas of the brain are working, but those colorful lights do not explain what those neurons are doing exactly, or even how they are doing it. Like in the case of the neurons firing from that algebra problem, one person's brain is doing it, and another's is merely trying. We now know a lot about the brain and its mysterious neurotransmitters. Specific neurons are in charge of certain things, like moving your finger, and we know when they do it, like in grasping, and often why they're doing it, to grasp. Yet we are only in the beginning stages of understanding the full potential of neurons, what they have the capacity to be responsible for when used properly in a fully evolved mind remains a mystery. We may not be as primitive as our ancestors, but we are still primitive compared to what we may be like in 1,000 years. There is no evidence that our physical gray matter, brain tissue, changes as we evolve and get smarter. It is the degree of functionality, not the quantity of matter, and that counts. In this case, size really doesn't matter. A child is not dumb, nor is his intellect stunted due to small brain size. While it is an issue of development, images of a child's brain doing math during that fMRI show the same neurons firing as those that fire for an adult, but with dramatically different results, except in my case, I suck at math. The main neurotransmitters involved in any discussion of drugs, pleasure behaviors, or consciousness, or mood are serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine, and endorphins, aka SDNE. And a common hormone involved in these areas is oxytocin. Like any molecule, they're made up of carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, hydrogen, and all the other atomic constituents we find in any and every other thing on the planet. The only observable difference between one molecule and another is the order and quantity of the atoms that it consists of. For example, 2 oxygen atoms versus 3, or 1 carbon atom versus 4. Science understands that serotonin is responsible for happy feelings, yet there is not, and probably never can be, an explanation as to what the essence of the happy feeling is, how it works, or why it makes us happy and not sad. We only know that certain hormones or transmitters are present and released when we feel this or that. That a happy molecule is basically made up of this number of atoms combined with that number of atoms, and that a sad molecule is simply a different number of atoms in a different order. But the why remains a mystery. What is happy anyway? The meaning of happy is rather arbitrary, and yet it's universal. Science has unveiled the mystery of the microcosm in quantum physics, having revealed the molecule, the atom, the subatomic parts of the atom, the subatomic parts that make those, quarks, gluons, and the most recently discovered bosons, and so on and so on. We're now landing on the shore of a final unifying theory that shows how the whole universal and material existence itself works and functions. Like with brain chemicals, scientists will unveil the parts and assign them their proper roles of responsibility. Labeling them, one by one, can know of them, but we will not know them. The true why will always elude conventional science. Scientists will fathom the how and the what. But if we are to truly understand the why, or the essence of these feelings, etc., or the inherent power of them, we will need to return to a less pragmatic science and begin to feel our way instead of thinking our way through the darkness. Trust the Force, Luke. You are going on a journey in this book. You are a psychonaut, an explorer, venturing into your own mind and discovering new horizons. to deepen the truth of yourself. You will hear of and learn things in this book that will challenge you and stimulate your thinking in directions you may not have planned on. We will explore every corner we can and turn over every stone in reach. Please, leave your preconceived ideas and perceptions behind as much as possible. While there is nothing too new here, I'm not the only pioneer to discover these new worlds, and certainly pioneers do not create the worlds they discover. This text is designed to bring cohesion to these matters and to be a comprehensive source and guide. A one-stop shop, giving you comprehensive information about addictive drugs and behaviors, their experience, their consequences, their pleasures, effects, risks, meanings, and the whole gamut of knowledge regarding them. There will be plenty of conclusions drawn, but the most important ones will be your own. My own agenda and motive is to supply information, and that's all. I accept full responsibility for my work, but you must take responsibility for what you do with it. Drugs don't kill people. Should you decide to ignore the pleas of caution and venture recklessly, you will find out the hard way that I am a well-informed veteran, expert. I learned a long time ago how to be right all the time. Just don't talk about stuff you're wrong about. Should you heed the advice and information here and proceed with caution, you may have some interesting experiences that may complement and contribute to your growth, belonging, and evolution of consciousness. But remember, this summation of my own experiences, drugs were an unnecessary detour. I do not regret them. Hell, I make my living off of them. Counseling and writing, not dealing. I now know I never need them to explore my own vistas of consciousness. I know I could have bypassed drugs as a route to higher knowledge, as the higher knowledge and truths I now find have nothing to do with drugs and are not reliant or dependent on them in any way. The most I can say about my involvement with drugs is this: I am grateful for them, grateful for the good times, grateful for the nudges into the philosophical and mystical paradigms of thought, and grateful I can now help liberate people from their trappings. First, I am grateful I have made a good living for many years as a counselor, speaker, and author on the subject. My involvement with drugs, combined with a slightly better than average gift for thinking, reasoning, insight, and articulation, has made me an expert and therefore earned me some well-needed means of support with which to support myself and my family. Not bad for a dope fiend. I am also grateful to drugs for playing a role in my search for ultimate truths. While my need for truth and absolutes was innate, it was my relationship with drugs that gave me evidence of them and reinforced my search when I may have given up through laziness or exhaustion. I always suspected there was something more to reality than what I perceived with my five senses. Drugs proved that to me, and because of that evidence, I pressed on. Still, it is apparent that many of my associates who are on similar paths of conscious evolution, but are at far more advanced stages of enlightenment than I, did not get there through drugs. They skipped the narcotic path and were instead led there by forces more spiritual and not artificial. And there are a lot of them, and I feel like I missed out. I no longer need drugs to pave my way or to illuminate my path. I travel toward enlightenment, and I now realize I never did need them. Drugs were integral for me due to my ignorance and stubbornness. Being unwilling to see the truth any other way, I required artificial means, insights to get me going. I'm a dum-dum. I thought drugs would liberate me from ignorance and lead me to a higher understanding. What they actually do is waste your time, valuable time you need to find true paths to liberation and higher understanding. They are a dead-end distraction. Out of retirement. For this project, I briefly came out of retirement for you. Many of today's drugs were not around when I was using, and others I simply never got around to trying. I have broken my long-term sobriety from narcotics to give you my first-hand account and insights about a few of these drugs. I have put myself at great risk, and I hope you appreciate it. I cannot lie and say I did not enjoy some of the revisits with my drug experiences, but much of it was done purely for authenticity and to deliver a personal, high-quality product in this text. And much of it was unpleasant and even scary. I knew as I began, and my loving partner supported me along the way, that I could get lost and descend into drug abuse for years again, losing everything before it was regained. I am an addict, and that is no lie or exaggeration. But while I never thought I handled drugs better than anyone else, I have somehow been quite exceptional at getting free from them and landing on my feet, strong and healthy. Some people can swallow swords and juggle or be athletes, and I can do this. Go with your talents, right? I knew the only way to bring you something of quality was to immerse myself into the experience Morgan Spurlock-like and give you the straight dope. You do not want some second-hand account. You want an expert's take, and you're getting one. You would not trust my advice or insights if you knew I was giving you theoretical accounts. You deserve to know the truth, and I would never consider giving anything less. What kind of psychonaut would I be if I wasn't willing to prepare, train, become informed, and then have the balls to make the leap down the straight vertical side? If you're going to make that jump based on anything I've said, I better have made it first. If you're willing to trust my counsel and not jump at all, it will only be because you trust me when I told you don't jump. So please, don't jump. Happy trails.